Hello everyone, welcome to Ain't Life Great video webcast. Today we're going to talk about the 2021 Bronco. Now we had not originally planned on doing another Bronco video. This is the third one we did. We did the one where I dimensioned the sheet, which is just me narrating. I did another one with my cousin Carl in a webcast format similar to this, and we discussed the dimensioning and what this means to the off-road community, and that video actually had quite a bit of success. And because of that, when the new prototype Mules came out, I decided to throw up another quick video and get your feedback, your opinion on what this means, as well as share my thoughts on what these prototype vehicles that have been spotted kind of revealed to us. First off, I need to address and clarify some issues. In both my prior videos, I called the Bronco the 2020 Ford Bronco, and that's kind of how it's been presented over the internet. But recently, it's come to my attention that it's actually going to be a 2021 model year Bronco, which actually has some real implications for what we're going to see in the rest of this video and maybe in future videos. The reason for that is, if it was a 2020 Bronco, that means you would start to see it in the dealership at the end of 2019. Now, being a 2021 model year, we're not going to see it until 2020. Now, that kind of stinks, but that also means, and something I was always confused about being a 2020 is about this time we should know what the Bronco looks like if it was a 2020 model year. I mean, it's going to hit the showroom floors in a couple months. But it being now a 2021 model year, now things shift a bit, and they don't have to be totally defined in that we can have test mules out now, not running the full body. And that's exactly what we have, whereas the body may still be in late stage development. I don't think it's going to be very long until we see prototype test mules with a near final body style on it. And when that happens, I think Ford will give us a better reveal. But right now we're in the test mule phase because we still have another year before it hits the production line. So what we have is arguably quite the ugly chopped Ford Ranger with a bed topper that's a little bit higher than the rest of the vehicle, weird proportions, but really nice wheels. Let's focus on the suspension here because test mules, they're not testing the body style, okay? What they're testing is the running gear of what the Bronco is going to be. And so when you get the early test mules, what you want to see is what's underneath the vehicle. And the first thing we see here are the tires. And what I really like, especially if you've seen some of my other webcasts, we're talking about the 2020 Defender, because it's coming out too. And I've been looking at a lot of those spy photos, and the wheels and tires are just pathetic. They're atrocious. And the Bronco, on the other hand, I mean, you look at this. These are nice rims. These are nice tires. It just looks ready for off-road, and that's what I like. If you know my channel, I like to throw these into AutoCAD and dimension them and see what I can find out. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't get a wheelbase. And the reason I couldn't get a wheelbase is every side shot of these prototypes has been, the vehicle hasn't been completely square. It's been kind of angled. And what that does is optically on the picture is it makes the wheels different sizes, and it tweaks it because you're doing a two-dimensional image in three-dimensional space. But what I could do, even though the tires were smaller, is I could compare ratios, and I could get a good idea for what the tire size is. Now, earlier in the previous video, we assumed that it would be like a Jeep running 17-inch rims, about 31, 32-inch tire. If we assume this is a 20-inch rim, which I don't think it is, then you have a 34-inch tire on this vehicle. I mean, that's 35, so that's huge. But that also means the wheelbase is really long. Now, we know the wheelbase isn't very long just by looking at the pictures. So if we tone it down to an 18-inch rim, you get right on a 31-inch tire. And that's what I think you're going to be running. So I would have liked to have seen 17-inch rims, but for me, 18 is not a deal breaker. There's plenty of off-road tires available in an 18-inch rim. You can't really tell if the calipers are sized such that 17s or ideally 16s would fit, but I can live with 18s, especially, again, after looking at what the Defender's going to get us. So go ahead and check that video out if you want to hear me rant even longer. So I tried to calculate this wheelbase, and like I said, the images weren't square. But comparing them and averaging them out based on a 31-inch tire size, I saw as low as a calculated 98-inch wheelbase. I think that's too low. up to a 122-inch wheelbase, which is too high. That's nearly what the Ranger is not chopped. Most of them were falling in around a 105 to a 111-inch range. Now for a two-door, 111 is ridiculous. For a two-door, 105 I think is too long. Everyone's like, look at this short wheelbase for a two-door. 105 inches for a two-door? No, I'm not a fan, but that seems to be the way things are going. If you look at this Discovery right here, it's a 100-inch wheelbase. I love it. It's 4 doors. Now granted, they're narrower doors, and they're not as big as the doors on these photos. You got a nice big full-size truck door and then the half cab. What this actually lines up really good, and we'll show the photos side by side, is the stock FJ Cruiser. The FJ Cruiser is a 105-inch wheelbase, 31-inch tires, and it almost, these photos almost match up. And that's a good thing in a way. I would have preferred the Bronco to be a Wrangler fighter, solid front and rear axles. I think there's a number of people who do. The FJ Cruiser is not a bad vehicle at all. Being compared to the FJ Cruiser, to me, is not a deal breaker. It just means that the Ford Bronco now, if you are doing the extreme end of the four-wheel drive trails, you're probably not going to pick this platform. You'll probably stick with the Wrangler. Now, we knew this ahead of time because we assumed it was going to be an independent front suspension. And if you look at these photos, that's confirmed. You've got an independent front suspension. The A-arms look pretty long, which means we should have some decent articulation, but that remains to be seen. It's always a crapshoot with an independent front suspension. Now, the rear is really interesting because you can see they've gone through a lot of effort to hide what's in the rear, which means whatever's there is what they don't want us to see. It's probably what they're testing out. I don't see the suspension arms for independent rear suspension, which is a good thing. It's hard to see the axle tubes and the pumpkin diff either. The camouflage is really good, but it looks like we got some bracketries for the link arms for a solid rear axle. This is a good sign that even if you're saddled with an independent front suspension, if you have a solid rear axle which can provide the articulation, you're doing okay. What I think, and what I think some others probably are assuming too, is that we are running Ford Ranger Raptor running gear. Now I'm going to show a photo of the 2018, I believe, Ford Ranger Raptor available overseas from a Thailand auto show, and you'll see that this backside where the pumpkin is, you'll notice the Watts linkage on the rear. That's exactly what I have in my Discovery 2. Now the Watts linkage holds the solid rear axle from moving side to side, and that helps keep your track on the highway well. It's really good for highway ride quality, okay? Now, most hardcore four-wheelers prefer a multi-link in the rear, similar to what a Jeep Wrangler runs. I guess it doesn't have a propensity to bind, and you get a little more articulation out of it. Now, in my experience, the Watts linkage hasn't really affected me negatively. I think it's probably okay, especially if it's designed and engineered right. I'm more happy that we have the solid rear axle. With that there, you can modify to whatever linkage you want. Notice the Raptor has some beefy shocks on there, and that's probably what they're trying to hide in this concept photo, is what kind of shocks or springs is running in this suspension here. So if this is the way it is, and notice the Raptor always comes later when on a Ranger or F-150. If we're running a Test Mule with Ranger Raptor running gear in the rear, that means from the get-go that the Ford Bronco is at least as good as Ford makes off-road vehicles right now, because the Raptor is the top of the heap as far as Ford goes regarding off-road performance. Your bare bones Bronco is going to be running Raptor gear. Now, I don't know if that means you'll get the special Raptor shocks. Maybe we'll have conventional shocks, but you'll have at least the Raptor suspension and the articulation within the suspension arms, which is a good thing, and I'm excited for that. The design, again, a lot of people are complaining about how ugly it is. Come on, this is a Test Mule. They're working on the actual Bronco body. They just need to test the drivetrain right now. So what's the easiest thing to do? You just chop that, put a topper on the back because it's going to be a box style and not a bed, and then just drive it and test your four-wheel drive, test your suspension, test everything that's on the bottom that's covered, and you don't really even care what's on the top. I believe the suspension and the wheelbase at this point are probably in the advanced stages. So maybe the body's ready. I would think in maybe, 6 months or so, we'll probably start seeing spy shots with the actual body on it. Anyway, guys, that's my thoughts on the Bronco. Please comment and subscribe, and thank you for your time.